And so as we learn from Dave's, he's going to come on in just a minute. I'm going to introduce him, but I will tell you a little bit about my experience in finding him. So his topic is on nature's remedies, unlocking fulfillment through homeopathy and herbal wisdom. And I started with an invitation to do a homeopathy class. And in my degree from Quantum University, I have a degree in natural medicine. I got a little bit of information about homeopathy and I found it to be intriguing. So in my degree with Quantum University, I learned that the homeopathy model is something that Western medicine can't figure out. If you take a typical homeopathic remedy, it's and I don't know if Dave's going to explain some of this, but typically it looks like it's being diluted, but what it's happening is that it's being the vital energy of it is increasing as the physical constituents are decreasing. And so it doesn't make sense from a linear logical approach. And I just found it to be very interesting. And so from that class, I have to give some credibility or some credit to Margaret Stewart, who has been, and I don't know where she's at in her training now, but she was basically kind of an apprentice, I guess you could say, of Dave's, and was studying this deep dive into the homeopathy for constitutional corrections. And so that's a whole field in itself. And it's something that literally has changed my life. When we talk about solutions and the quantum level, they will change personality. This is something that can change something so constitutionally that a person who's been in a chronic pattern their whole life, and maybe even for those who believe in lifetimes, it can actually shift that. And so that's when I learned about Dave. And so I sat down, I actually scheduled 3 appointments in a row. He does 15-minute appointments. And I was like, I am going to drive all the way to Salt Lake and I want 3 in a row. And so he's very efficient, but I got this valuable time having him walk me through what he knew about this. There are literally only about 2 books out there on this. It is not a big field. And here's the reason why. And this is something that I hope to see change, because there is no money in homeopathic remedies. They're $10 and they could last you years. That $10 bottle could be all you need for years. So there's no money in it. And so the field of pharmaceuticals obviously has got a lot more behind it because of that. And the field of homeopathy is quieter, but sometimes being quiet is also powerful. And so Dave is not a really loud person. He is wise beyond, most of our understanding, but he's highly intuitive. He decided to launch his own business in 1995 after he'd worked in health food stores. And he just wanted to help people help themselves be better, to get better health in a simple, low cost way. And so this is a little bit of his story. Along with his wife, Teresa, he used a second mortgage along with 6 $5,000 credit cards to open their first health food store. Together, they worked long days building a customer base, and long story short, they succeeded. And yes, it is it's Dave's Health and Nutrition in Salt Lake City that is still going strong 30 years later. He does in-person and telehealth appointments, and he does a very personalized approach. If you go into the store, you can get a lot of solutions just showing up. So, all right. So Dave, I'm excited. This is the first time I've had Dave on a summit. I've met him in person, but I'm really grateful he accepted this invitation.
Right. Well, thanks so much for having me here. I'm privileged to be here. It's good to see you. It's been a long journey. We're going to celebrate the 30th year for the health food store. Just for some people that don't know me, I've got a degree in nutrition. I'm a certificated homeopath, and I'm a master herbalist. And mostly what I do, because I've got so many really great people that work at the store, is I do appointments every day. So I do 15-minute appointments. And as a homeopath, that's really short time versus a lot of other ones. But I've been doing this for a lot of years. So I'd love. We'll start off with homeopathy. I love homeopathy. I should have brought my homeopathic book, and it's called a repertory. And a repertory is about 2,700 pages, and we'll see it here in a minute. Repertory and the Materia Medica. So there, in homeopathy, there's two basic books that we deal with, and the repertory is how you find your symptoms, and it's been used for over 200 years. Homeopathy has been around. It is the second largest healthcare system on the face of the planet. The largest healthcare system is herbs for the amount of people that they serve. Homeopathy is number 2, and Western medicine is way down the line there. But they do consume most of the money. So homeopathy is used by hundreds of millions of people every single day all over the world. It's growing by leaps and bounds in the United States. At one point in the United States, 25% of all medical doctors were homeopaths. That means they just use the homeopathic remedies alone. As medical doctors in the United States, there were over 10 medical colleges up until about 1910, 1920, when they got taken over by the American Medical Association, and it was declared a monopoly by them. And the doctors that practiced homeopathy still practiced for several years after that. It is very powerful. So most of what happens with homeopathy is symptomatic prescribing. And what that means is if you have a cold or a flu, if you have earache, if you have just about anything, you can find it in the Materia Medica or the repertory, and then you can find the details in the Materia Medica. A couple of years ago, I decided to write a book, and this is my book right here. It's Homeopathy for Today. So if you're thinking about homeopathy, you want it simple, and you want it to be really effective, written by a homeopath, then this is your book. And this is available both on Amazon, or you can come to our store in Salt Lake, Dave's Health and Nutrition, and get this. And this will be a great way to help you to improve health in your family. Let me show you the repertory. I call it the good book on here, and it looks like a very large Bible, and it has Bible paper. Some of them are printed in India, but the books are like 6 inches thick, and so I prefer the ones with Bible paper in it. And in here is just about every symptom that you could ever imagine in here. And so you can go to wherever it is, find the remedies, and then what you do is you go to the Materia Medica, and the Materia Medica is the details. So this tells you the remedy, the repertory tells you the remedy. The Materia Medica tells you all the details of it. So the better the match, the better the remedy works. So what that means is we're searching to find out what are your symptoms, what are the symptoms of a homeopathic remedy. You match them, and then you usually get really great results because it tells the body how to fix itself. And there's a misconception oftentimes out there that homeopathy works slowly, but that can't be further from the truth, because sometimes it works within seconds, and we can see some really great results with that. And so acutely, or so acute means it's something that's happened in the last 2 weeks. So if it's happened in the last 2 weeks, things will clear up very, very quickly. So years ago, this woman came in with a 3-year-old child, and the 3-year-old child bumped into a chair, and you could see the goose egg on this kid's forehead just rising. It was quite amazing. And the mom, which was into homeopathy, she just stuck her hand in her purse, pulled out the first remedy we're going to talk about is arnica. And she just took a pellet, shoved it in the kid's mouth, and the kid was used to it because the beauty of homeopathy is most of the time it comes on sugar pellets. So the active ingredient has been put on sugar pellets, and literally you could see that goose egg recede again, and almost immediately the crying stopped. I also had somebody that works for me that fell down some stairs, and she's complaining on how bruised she was, and I recommended arnica for her. And she goes, oh yeah, why didn't I think about that? Because we just sell a lot of arnica because it works so well for any kind of soft tissue injuries. So if you think of any kind of injury, you always want to think number one of arnica. And so she started taking arnica, and within just a couple of hours, the bruising felt less. And overnight, as she explained to me today, the bruising is almost gone, even though it was quite a fall down the stairs. And so arnica is one of our major remedies that we use. In fact, arnica is so good that a lot of surgeons that do the facial surgeons, what do they call them? The plastic surgeons. So it's amazing how many plastic surgeons don't believe in homeopathy and use arnica homeopathically because it makes them look really good, because it takes away the bruising from their surgery really rather quickly. And several years ago, I went into this skin doctor / plastic surgeon, and he goes, oh yeah, arnica works really fantastic. And I said, well, why don't you try some of the other homeopathic remedies, because they can work equally as well. And he definitely was open to that. So we'll talk about a couple of remedies. So arnica is definitely a remedy that everybody wants to have on hand. And at our store, we carry more homeopathics from the world's largest manufacturer, Boiron. It's a French company, and we carry more of the remedies, approximately 300 remedies from Boiron. So we get people from all over the state of Utah and other places, and they contact us because we carry so many homeopathic remedies, a lot more than anybody else does. So the number 2 remedy, and this is a remedy for, is the name of the remedy is called cantharis. And cantharis is the blister beetle. And if you were to touch this blister beetle on its own, it would cause blistering. It would cause burning and blistering on your skin. And in fact, even today, they use cantharis to put on warts. And so there are some doctors that use it as a tincture, and they put it on warts, and it blisters and burns the warts off. Well, I'm not a super big fan of that one because I'm not into pain. So if we use homeopathy, it does the exact opposite, and it takes the pain away from burns. I am super surprised that burn centers don't use cantharis because it works so well. So a number of years ago, I had a lawnmower, and I was mowing my lawn, and one of the wheels came off the lawnmower, and I thought I was grabbing it by the base, and I grabbed it by the heater area of it. And what happened is I burnt my fingertips. And I said to myself, oh, good, now I get to try out cantharis and see if it works. And you could hear it sizzle on there. And they protect the lawnmowers now so that you don't have any heat units that are exposed. And so I went in the house, and all I had was the cantharis 30C, and I used it, and I never got any pain as long as I used it every 5 minutes. And then at that time, when my girls were young, they were bugging me, and they said, hey, we're supposed to go to a movie. We had a daddy-daughter date, and And I said, okay. And then we went by the store, which was still open, and I got a 200C cantharis and took one dose of it, and it took the pain away immediately. It never blistered, and this was a blistering type burn. It should have been. And the whole time during the movie, I was just going like this because my fingertips were numb where I burned it, but there was no pain. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, it blistered, or the skin came off. There was no pain, but the skin came off. And so I did something else another 6 months or a year, but then I had the cantharis 200C, and I took it immediately, and just one dose took away the burn pain. So this is for 1st and 2nd degree burns. There are other homeopathic remedies you can take for 3rd degree burns, and they work within seconds. It's the most amazing thing is what it does. And so we have a lot of remedies that we can use for symptomatic prescribing, and anybody can use this. It's safe. So the beautiful part about homeopathy is it's safe for everyone. You can be pregnant or nursing or old or young, or you can be taking lots of medications or no medications, and homeopathy works. The only thing you have to remember is you throw the pellets into your mouth, you suck on them like candy, you don't eat anything or drink anything, just 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after. So that's, we'll just talk about one other remedy. It's called rust tox, and then we're going to talk about constitutional prescribing, which is where the real magic is for homeopathy. So the other remedy that we use on a symptomatic basis is called rust tox. And we remember this remedy, and it comes from the plant poison ivy. Okay, so if you get poison ivy, it causes all kinds of skin issues, and you can use rust tox for skin issues, but it's also our #1 remedy that we use for joint or arthritic issues. And we like to call it the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz. So if you remember the Wizard of Oz, he saw the Tin Man, and this Tin Man was frozen because he had been in the rain. So it was a storm, he got rained on, and all of his joints froze up. And so Dorothy finally found the Tin Man, remember? And she oiled him, and he was going creak, 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 creak. Ah, this is so good. And so as long as he kept moving and it wasn't damp weather, so this is our weathercock remedy, wasn't damp weather, then the Tin Woodsman would function well and he'd do all right, unless it rained again. And so rust tox is our premier remedy for when it's painful when you first start out, or when a storm comes, or wet weather or cold weather, and you get arthritic or joint type pains. And again, the results can happen in seconds or minutes, and for other people that have had it a long time, it may be a more gradual process, but you can definitely get a lot of feedback from that. So the question is there a homeopathic remedy for the side effects of statin medications, or are there homeopathics for cholesterol? So there are homeopathics for cholesterol, for sure. It depends on the person. So I don't have a identifiable single remedy for that. If you are taking statin drugs, you have to remember that commonly it causes dementia-like symptoms. It which is called cognitive decline. It eats up your muscles. It's got a term called lysing, or eating up your muscles. It pushes you toward diabetes. It causes liver damage, and it strips your body of the coenzyme Q10, which is a protection for the heart. So that medication has gotten a lot of bad press for it, and for a good reason. And if you feel like you have to take a statin drug, I'm going to put on my nutritional hat on here. And my nutritional hat says take 1 to 200 milligrams of coenzyme Q10, and you can take away some of the side effects that you get from the statin drugs. But there are other things, and there is an herb called 𝐾𝐨𝐽, and that works really great. In fact, most of my clients that take that get as good a results as the statin drugs, and their doctors are usually happy on that. But that's another subject. So let's go to what's called constitutional homeopathic prescribing. And that's where the real magic is, and that's why people come to see me, because as a homeopath, I can ask the questions, and they're called keynote questions. And keynote questions are, what leads me to believe that your pattern has to do with a specific homeopathic pattern? And then we get the good results. I always tell people, we all have a personality. There's no good ones, there's no bad ones, but we all have one. We're all out of balance to some degree or another, and each personality has a package that's associated with it. And so people come in and they will have either physical problems and or mental thinking, and they also have, or they can have issues with maybe depression, or they don't feel as good as they'd like to. And so when you get that right constitutional remedy, you'll see an amelioration, which is an improvement in that area. If a person is out of balance in all those areas, then it can happen very quickly, or it can happen over a period of weeks or months, but you can see a definite improvement. I'll tell you a story about this one on here. So there are approximately 30 constitutional remedies. And in my book here, Homeopathy for Today, I have the keynotes. And the keynotes for the homeopathic remedy called Ignatia. So Ignatia is a seed from a plant that contains strychnine. And if you would take strychnine poisoning and you would take the personality of a person, it's very similar in there. And so we use homeopathy in a non-toxic form, and we match that with the symptoms of a person. So here are the keynotes to a person. So if a person comes into my office and they walk in the door and they go, oh, so good to be here, that's called sighing. And so one of the keynotes for this remedy, and that's part of their package, is they sigh. And when they start to talk about their problem, they cry. So that's another keynote. And then as we continue to talk, I'll ask the question, or maybe they'll volunteer it to me, and they say, I've got a lump in my throat, or it feels like I've got a lump in it, or a ball in my throat, and I have a hard time taking a nice deep breath. And those are the keynotes for the Ignatia personality. And so I had a woman come to see me, and I've used this many, many times. And one of the most amazing thing was the Ignatia is mostly females on there. And she came in and she said, every 2 weeks, I come up to my husband and I have a meltdown, just a terrible meltdown. And I can't forgive him for everything he did do, he didn't do, he should have done, and ought to have done. And I'm so resentful, and I feel so guilty all the time about everything. And so I gave her Ignatia 200C, and she took the remedy, and she came back 2 weeks later, and she said, you know what? I looked him in the eye, and I said, I forgive you for everything you did do, you didn't do, you should have done, you ought to have done. And you know what? It was done. I was able to release all of that. And in the meantime, our relationship is tons better. She was also going in for some other therapy. And 2 weeks later, she reported that she didn't need that therapy anymore. And that was the first time that I used homeopathy. And we saw a big life change and improvement in their relationship. So what interested me in homeopathy was I got a degree in psychology from the University of Utah. My father was a psychologist in private practice, and so he wanted me to take over his business or his practice. And I decided that I didn't want his practice because it was dealing with sex offenders, and that was just not my cup of tea. And what I also noticed is a lot of people that went in got medications, and they had a lot of side effects. And there are a lot of people from certain areas that have counselors for years, and they're taking medications for years, and that's all they got, with all the attending side effects, whether it's financial or whether it's physical or even mental side effects on there. And so a person can take a remedy like Ignatia, they can use it for a period of months, and once they feel like they're not sighing, they're not crying as much, they don't have that lump in their throat, and they can take a nice deep breath, then they're done. They're done with taking it, and only if they have a really serious problem or an event or a grief or something like that, that they need to take the remedy again. So it isn't something that you have to take forever. So Western medicine has successfully told us that we are broken people. We cannot be helped, but we can be medicated for the rest of our life. So one last constitutional remedy out of 30, so we don't have time for all 30, but one last one is the remedy called Arsenicum Album. So Arsenicum Album is arsenic, and arsenic is a highly toxic type of metal. And at the turn of the 1800s to 1900s, there were weevils in flour. And so the manufacturers would just put arsenic in with the flour, and they'd kill the weevils, and they solved all the problems. Only problem is people got arsenic poisoning. And so the original way that we knew about Arsenicum Album was from toxicology. So in homeopathy, we use things called provings, and provings are where we take a healthy subject, give them a homeopathic remedy that's non-toxic, see what the outcomes are if they take it long enough to get the symptoms, write them down, put them in a book called the Materia Medica, so you can know what those symptoms are, use that particular remedy that produced the symptoms, and for a person that already has those remedies, it will tend to reverse everything. So Arsenicum Album is very toxic. We see it in our society on there. And so the keynotes to Arsenicum Album is a person will walk in the door and they are a well-dressed person. Okay. And so I always ask them, I say, so you're very well-dressed. Is this how you go in public? And they go, oh yes, I always go in public like this. My sense of order is that I look good when I go out to public. And then I ask them, and I say, so what is it? What does your closet look like? And they go, oh, well, my closet's all lined up. It's to the colors, to the seasons, to the sizes, to everything like that. And so Arsenicum Album is a very perfectionistic person, and they get caught up into the perfectionism. And so they can't help themselves. But if a picture is not straight, they will go and straighten it. They will have the perfect house. They will be the super mom, the super provider, and they'll just be the everything person. So a number of years ago, I had a woman, she came in to see me, and she says, I have chronic fatigue syndrome. And I says, oh? And she says, yes. And I said, you always have to ask the question, when did it start? It's called the cause, or in homeopathy, we call it never well sins, or the medical term is etiology. What was the cause? And she says, well, I have 3 kids, and I was taking care of the kids full time. I was going to school full time, and I was working full time. Now, I don't know about you, but 24 hours in a day without sleep, you just can't do that. And so at some point, the immune system pulled the plug and says, you have chronic fatigue syndrome, and you are now going to sleep 16 hours a day, and you will be barely functional for 8 hours a day. And she had experienced that for about 2 years. And then she came to me and she says, Dave, what can you give me so that I can work full time, take care of my kids full time, and do school full time? And, you know, I kind of smiled a little bit, because right up here, she still wanted to be that everything. And so I said, well, why don't you try the 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐵𝐿 Album homeopathic, 200C potency once a week. And 2 weeks later, she brought her 9-year-old son, and he was just so excited he couldn't believe it. And he says, my mom is back. And she went from sleeping 16 hours a day to sleeping 8 hours a day and being fully functional with the family 16 hours a day. And what was even more important about it is she no longer felt that compulsion to be that super mom, super student, and super worker. And she was satisfying being a housewife taking care of her 3 lovely children. In fact, the 3rd time she came with her husband, and he was just so ecstatic that his wife was back. And that's how powerful 𝐟𝐶𝐫𝐵𝐿 Album is. Now, even the constitutional remedies have symptomatic remedy use. So even though we don't have to have all the symptoms, we can get the benefits. So years ago, I had the wonderful experience of going back to our Mexican restaurant that we always go to because it was great food. And they had a different format where you kind of served yourself instead. And as we got home, we felt this big rumbling in our stomach, really bad. And so I said, you know what? We're food poisoned. And my wife goes, no, we've been there several times. That's not possible. And so I gave her and I gave me just the 30C 𝐟𝐶𝐫𝐵𝐿 Album. And what happened is within 10 minutes, all the rumbling went away. And so what I did is I took and then interestingly enough, my wife said, oh yeah, see, it wasn't food poisoning. It went away this fast. And I go, oh. And then the next night, a person on TV from the health department said, guess what? We're closing down this particular Mexican restaurant because of food poisoning issues. And it was like, yes, yes. So anyway, got many, many stories of 𝐟𝐶𝐫𝐿 Album for food poisoning, for many other reasons, or a constitutional remedy. And by the way, being a perfectionist is not a bad thing. I've got 2 or 3 people that work for me, and I treasure them dearly because of their ability to organize things, but in a healthier way. So this is how homeopathy can happen. It can do wonderful, marvelous things, okay? So so you can always get a consultation. So you can always go to 𝐷avesHealthAndNutrition.com and make an appointment. And we can figure out your constitutional remedy, or if you have a particular problem, we can use herbs or homeopathics to make your life much easier. So let's go to herbal wisdom. So herbs are also very exciting, and they also have a very important place on there because they are the #1 healthcare system on the face of the planet. So Oftentimes, we use herbs in a way as if we would use them as drugs. And that is sort of a Western viewpoint, as if they were drugs. And we'll look at that. And then there's what's called an energetic version of homeopathic, or excuse me, herbs. And that energetic version of it is much more effective, is much deeper, works much better. So let's first go to ginger, and then we'll, at the end, I'll tell you about some really amazing herbs that are very life-changing. So ginger is a wonderful herb, but ginger and turmeric, if they're not organic, are the most highly pesticide herbs on the planet. In fact, they even show people with hazmat units, and they're spraying them with antifungal agents and stuff like that. So my advice to you on the ginger and the turmeric is you buy them from the store, buy nothing other than organic. Otherwise, you will be making yourself even sicker because of all the pesticides in there. So ginger is wonderful because it is helpful to make the immune system work better. It will help the digestive system. It'll add heat to the digestive system, which means it'll stimulate the stomach acid to work properly in there. And also, it is an anti-inflammatory. Maybe not the most potent anti-inflammatory, but a very good one. So some people can do well with ginger, some not so well. Find out for you whether it works. Turmeric, and I wrote a little booklet on turmeric and did a lot of research on turmeric, and there's over 10,000 studies on turmeric or its component, curcuminoids, on there. And again, you want to make sure that it's organic, but it works on everything from depression to inflammation to digestion. It's amazing. And, you know, if you can add a little ginger to your food, that's great. Not everybody appreciates the flavor of it. So use that. I recommend that as an anti-inflammatory, but usually I add that with boswellia, which is frankincense. And between the two, if you can use it correctly, it can work as good as ibuprofen does, but without the side effects on that. So everybody knows about echinacea, and echinacea has been used for thousands of years among the Native Americans. And it is a very powerful remedy, and it works in a couple of different ways. But one of the ways that it works is it is antibacterial. So there is a difference between an antibacterial and an antibiotic. So antibiotics means against life. And it's like throwing a hand grenade into a room, and it just kills everything. And it leaves a really nasty mess in there, and somebody's got to clean it up. And so when you throw an antibiotic into the body, it creates a mess. It kills everything in its path. And then the body has to do that dirty job, and it tries to clean up everything. And so it's not a very efficient way. It can cause liver problems, many other serious problems. So antibiotics, if we can avoid them, and sometimes we have to have them, I'm not saying they're evil, but we have to be really careful about using them. But if we use a couple of different herbs that can work as not antibiotics, but, well, they also work as antiviral, but they're antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal, and many other things. So science, well, first of all, I did a deep dive into Chinese medicine and said, since the time of man, there have been infections, right? How did the Chinese deal with infections, and what did they call them? And it turned out that they called them fire toxins. So the Chinese word for infections were fire toxins. And so So they dealt really well with fire toxins. And so people got infections from the time, forever. And how did they deal with them? And they dealt with them very effectively because they used substances that worked against fire toxins. So in the Native American tradition, we see echinacea, and we can see garlic. We see in the Chinese thing, we have an herb called 𝐾𝐽. And 𝐾𝐽 is very rich in an herb called berberines. And berberines have that same effect. They're antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal, and even better than that, they tend to work very similar to metformin to balance your blood sugars, only it doesn't damage the liver. It actually helps the liver. So science has finally figured out that bacterial colonies have flourished, in fact, in the last few years, because the FDA has actually continued, even in the face of scientific research, that you shouldn't put antibiotics in animal feed because it will go into humans. And as a result of that, we start to see that the bacterial colonies have produced a thing called biofilms. So biofilms are it's a protection, sort of a protection against their colonies. And so we see our immune system will hit that protection, bounce off, and be ineffective. And antibiotics can be very ineffective these days. They're getting stronger antibiotics with stronger side effects. And what they're madly doing is they're trying to find drugs that will dissolve the biofilms, which I would be afraid of because they're probably more toxic than the antibiotics. So as we use these antimicrobial herbs such as echinacea, garlic, 𝐾𝐽, and I find 𝐾𝐽 is the most effective one. I really like that. And what it does is it works, in my opinion, with what I've seen for myself, my family, for a lot of other people, is it works very similar to antibiotics. And here's the other thing, is if you have that really bad one that eats up the body, then you can use the 𝐾𝐽 or echinacea or garlic along with it, and it will break down the biofilms and make the antibiotics work actually better. So you've got a number of options here. And the very last one that we have on here is the name of an herb called Zembrin, with a Z, Zembrin. Most people haven't heard of Zembrin, but it comes from South Africa, and the name of it is called Scaledium tortuosum, and they call it 𝐾𝐭. And so Zembrin is a form of the plants. It's actually one of the species. So there are several species, and this is a species that they've done a bunch of research on. And the research that they've done on it shows that it can be helpful for ADD, ADHD, PTSD, anxiety and depression, and it has no side effects. Just from use with literally thousands of people that we've dealt with, in fact, it is the biggest seller in the store by far, it works in 2 hours. So you can notice the effect in 2 hours that you just feel a lot better with it. And so this one has been a really game changer. So just to sum up what my goals for everybody that comes in to see me is, I want them to feel better within a week or less. And with the Zembrin, I can get people to feel better usually within 2 hours on there. So with the Zembrin, they usually take a capsule of Zembrin once in the morning, once in the evening. The natives used it to connect with their ancestors. And if I take it too late at night, I have little stranger dreams. They're good dreams, but they're a little strange. And I usually connect up with my parents that have passed on. One or the other shows up in my dreams, or some other ancestor shows up in my dreams. So it's a very interesting herb. I think it is underutilized, and I think everybody should have that opportunity to do that, because even if a person doesn't directly have this, there are a couple of simple things that make somebody's life more pleasant on there. And that's one of the tools that I use so that a person within a week can feel better. And that's why a lot of people come back and tell their friends. And I think that's important, that we do things that are inexpensive, that are powerful and gentle, and won't cause any kind of problems. Even if they're on other medications, they can still take Zembrin.
Well, I'm going to interject here and say Zembrin is something that I am using. Yes, it's been I had no idea it existed. And so thank you, because that's one of the solutions we're finding in my family. And I'm very interested in several things you mentioned today. There's been a really great chat. And so I think you've had some great assistance with responding to that. Thank you. Thank you. There's so much gratitude going towards you for taking the time to do this and share your incredible wisdom. As a gift to both Dave and the audience, we're going to purchase a book. I'm going to get my own copy and another to give away of the Homeopathy for Today. Is that, sorry, yeah, that's the one. And so I'm giving people an extra way. So we've mentioned the frequency assessment, and there's also a survey we just put in there. And anything else you want to just conclude with, Dave? Or you?
I just want to tell everybody, we have one question, and then I want to tell everybody that thank you so much for coming, spending your time. I love doing this. I'm very passionate about this. So one last question. Homeopathic for strep throat is usually belladonna is a good one, or phytolacca for strep throat for homeopathy. Anyway, thanks so much for having me on. Good to
This was amazing.
Talk to everybody.
Yes. And there's so much to this. And I think what we don't realize is that we can be using this, like, again, like I said before I introduced you, there's so much we can be doing with our own, in our own hands, you know, through empowerment of education. I understand, I saw a chat in the chat that you might be creating a course online for training.
Close to launching.
We're close to launching a bunch of information on a number of classes that I've taught for my homeopathic study group. And by the way, anybody can sign up for my homeopathic study group for free. You just have to contact the store, and they'd be happy to put you on there for free.
Definitely, if you're in the Salt Lake area, we've got Dave's in like kind of 30th South-ish. In
3900 South.
3900 South.
880 East.
I know some of you aren't in the Utah area, and so I love that Dave offers also the online or phone consults, which are also powerful. So, and we get to wrap up. And so as far as like finishing off today, it's been like amazing. We had so many good presenters and such good response to that. I'm excited to see you back tomorrow. Oh, so we still have a question, Dave, if you're still around. The repository book, which is, I think, was that like your homeopath or herbal Bible? It was the Bible, maybe. If your team can share that, or if that's a 700 pages or something, did you say? More than that, 2,000? It was a lot. 2,100 pages. There we go. Someone wants to know what edition you have.
Okay, so get the first through the third edition. They're a lot easier. This one's a lot harder. So get the first 3 editions and you'll be really happy. The fourth one is just very, it's just a harder one. So first 3 editions of that one.
Good to know.
And then I've got my homeopathy for today. We'll simplify.
That looks more bite-sized.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.